Mm.
Ok. Tenemos ya 188, 90.
Así es. No sé si Sara o Lola también nos van indicando cuando ustedes consideren que sea un buen momento para dar inicio.
Para 8:10, ¿verdad?
Ah, perfecto.
Sí,
Damos unos minutos más.
unos
3
minutos.
minutos entonces.
Faltan 3 minutos.
Y
Perfecto.
si nos apoyan, pues apagando su audio y
Some
por
people are
supuesto
coming from
prendiendo
a
su
long way
video.
off, Peru and Canada. It'll take them a while to get here, huh?
Enviando desde aquí a todos. Entonces, cuando vayan a hablar, van a tener que abrir su micrófono, ¿ok?
Los que van entrando, nos gustaría que en el chat pongan de dónde nos están, de dónde nos van a estar escuchando.
Mm.
Listo. Ujú.
Ujú.
¿Listo? Listo. Ok. Bueno, pues primero que nada, bienvenidas, bienvenidos, bienvenides a todos ustedes. Soy Gabriela Vargas Vallarino, la presidenta del Instituto Latinoamericano de Estudios de la Familia. Y bueno, eh, tenemos aquí a Monte Bobele, ¿no? Con quien vamos a estar platicando el día de hoy, Diviana Moreno y yo. Y bueno, si quieren traducción, les recomiendo entonces que vayan a la parte de abajo, la parte de abajo del lado derecho. Deben de tener por ahí un mundo, le pican y ya sea que si lo quieren en español, porque nuestro querido Monte va a estar hablándonos en inglés. Ujú.
Perdona, Gaby, puede aparecer un mundo o si no, tres puntos suspensivos que dice más.
Así es.
Parte inferior derecha y luego salen varias opciones. Una de las primeras es interpretación y ahí le dan español, como mencionaba Gaby.
Así es, así es. Ujú. Bueno, pues Vivi, te doy la palabra de inicio.
Sí, Pues muy buenas noches a todas las personas que nos acompañan. Es un gusto enorme darles la bienvenida a este encuentro con el doctor Monte Bobele, a quien conocemos por su trayectoria internacional y por su gran contribución al desarrollo de la terapia de sesión única. Hoy nos reúne un tema que aporta significativamente a la manera en que entendemos el trabajo clínico y conversaremos en este encuentro acerca de la mirada desde la cual se realiza el trabajo, desde la terapia de sesión única. También abordaremos algunas preguntas que acompañan la implementación y que nos hemos ido encontrando también como en el desarrollo de la publicidad y del encuentro que se va a realizar en febrero. Hay personas que se han acercado, han realizado algunas preguntas y también desde ese lugar es que surge la idea de este encuentro para poder empezar a entablar la conversación el día de hoy. Y finalmente también abriremos el micrófono para que las dudas, los comentarios que ustedes quieran realizar, lo podamos tener ese espacio al finalizar este encuentro. Entonces, esperamos que este encuentro fortalezca nuestra mirada profesional, que nos invite a seguir explorando un modelo o este modelo con mayor profundidad y pues especialmente que nos vayamos como introduciendo al seminario internacional de terapia de sesión única que se desarrollará de manera híbrida en la Ciudad de México y bueno, en línea, 6 y 7 de febrero de 2026. Después, más adelante, les iremos dando los detalles acerca de este encuentro. Y pues por el momento, Monte, es un gusto tenerte con nosotras, te damos la bienvenida y abrimos el micrófono también para que tú puedas saludar.
Bueno, pero antes que nada, bueno.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Ok, good evening. Muy bien, muy bien. Bueno, Monte, quisiera que nos platicaras un poquito de ti, ¿no? De quién eres, cómo te empezaste a formar, en fin, lo que te gustaría platicarnos.
Certainly. Well, welcome everyone. I am just really impressed with, and people are still coming in. That we have over 200 people on um, um, this chat this evening, and I'm quite impressed with how far away some of you are. I've seen a couple of people from Canada and Peru, people from the U.S. I saw somebody from Florida and Alabama. And I see Juliana is here from Copenhagen. Wow. I was just in Finland this time last month, so I was in your neighborhood, Juliana. So welcome everyone from basically all over the world. Obviously, most of you are from Mexico City, and I hope to see a lot of you in Mexico City in February. So I'm a psychologist. I was trained as a family therapist. I live in San Antonio, Texas, which is just really far in North Mexico, and have lived in San Antonio for most of my adult life. And I have been teaching in university.
El
Monty,
micrófono de
your microphone is off. Monty, your microphone was off.
How about now?
Yes.
So for how long was I muted?
For a few seconds only.
Solo fueron unos segundos, Monte, pero sí te
Just a
escuchamos.
few seconds.
Okay. I didn't want to repeat myself too much. So let me just say that I'm really honored to be invited by a family therapy training program as prestigious as the ILEF is in Mexico City. I actually began my career as a psychotherapist when I did some postdoctoral training years ago in family therapy in Galveston with Harry Galician and Harlene Anderson, two well-known family therapists that I'm sure many of you have known. And what I learned in those days as a beginning family therapist has stayed with me all of these years. And that is, if we begin to think differently about people and their problems, we'll see new ways of working with them. We'll have new ways of understanding them if we begin to think differently about them. And so basically, what I've spent most of my career doing is helping therapists get better at doing more with less. And that's partly because clients have been telling us for decades that that's how they naturally use therapy. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So I've been fortunate enough to have been involved in the family therapy, the single session therapy community for around 30 years now. And I've helped develop one at a time or single session models in Canada and the US. I've spent quite a bit of time training in Mexico and working in clinics. I keep coming back to single session therapy for one reason again and again. And that is clients change faster than our theories tell us they should change. And I got curious about that. And you know what happens when psychologists get curious? We build whole movements around that common interest. So I'm happy to have been part of the single session therapy community now for over 30 years.
Ujú. Así es, Monte, y es a partir de esta curiosidad que mencionas que se crea, ¿no? El movimiento de terapia de sesión única. ¿Tú nos podrías compartir, Monte, cuáles fueron las ideas iniciales, cuáles son las ideas que acompañan a esta forma de acompañamiento terapéutico o de trabajo terapéutico?
Okay, well, let's start with just a brief history of how we got to where we are in 2025 with single session therapy. It didn't really begin as a
Ujú,
theory or a way of thinking about doing therapy. It started as a reality. I would imagine that if I ask you to vote in the chat here about how many of you have had clients that only came one time for a session and never came back, we would find that many of the people listening in this evening have had that experience. So in some ways, you're already single session therapists. You've already had that experience. And that's what has happened is in the early days, people began to notice that people would come only once, maybe twice, even if they were invited to come for a second or a third or a fourth session. They just didn't. And all of us were originally trained in models of doing therapy that assumed that we would, at the end of every session, invite the client naturally to come back for another session, and then at the end of the second session, ask them to come back. And that's the way our trainers and professors taught us therapy worked. And that is the way it worked for a few people. But most people don't come back after one session. And then two is the second most frequent number. So when my colleague Moshe Tallman, who was a psychologist in California back in the late 70s and 80s, noticed that in the clinic where he was working, most of his clients didn't come back for a second visit, even though they had been scheduled for a second visit. And he was a well-trained family therapist. He was a well-trained psychologist. He did his internship with Salvador Minuchin in family therapy. So he was a systemic thinker. But what he decided to do was very amazing at that time. He got the list of all of his clients that hadn't come back for a second visit in the last year, and he picked up the phone and he called them. And he said, "Hi, this is Dr. Tallman, and I'm calling to see why you didn't come back for that second appointment that we scheduled when you came last month, last week, 6 months ago." And what he found was something very surprising. Of the 80 or so people that he contacted, about 60 of them said, "Well, Dr. Tallman, you helped me so much in that session, I didn't really feel a need to come back." Wow. Two-thirds of the people that he was thinking he hadn't been helpful with, because isn't that what we all thought when we started out and our clients didn't come back? Didn't we always think, oh, we must be terrible therapists, the clients don't like me? And what Tallman, and later he invited two of his colleagues, Michael Hoyt and Bob Rosenbaum, who also worked there in the family therapy clinic at Kaiser Permanente. They actually dove into the records for the clinic for the whole past year, and they called all of the clients who hadn't come back for a second visit. And what they found was it didn't matter who the therapist was, what the training was, what the theory was, what the profession was. More often than not, people that didn't come back for a second visit said that they had been helped and they didn't feel a need to come back. So they thought, maybe we should do some research about that. And that led to the first book on single session therapy in 1990. Moshe Talman published that book. And coincidentally, that was the same year that my colleague Arnie Slive opened a walk-in single session therapy clinic in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And he wasn't aware at the moment that Tallman's crew had been working on single session therapy, but they rapidly uh, began to follow the model that the California people had designed. So um, that's kind of a brief history. Since that time, there have been 5 international conferences or symposiums on single session therapy. One was in Australia, the first one. The second one was in Canada. The third one was back in Australia. The fourth one was in Rome, Italy. And the fifth one was just last summer in Chicago. So this has become a widely adopted model and way of thinking about therapy all over the world now.
Ok, ok. Muchas gracias, Monte. Sí, fíjate que nosotros en el instituto, en el ILEF, muchas personas llegan a pedirnos apoyo y hacer una solicitud. Y el hecho de escucharlas un ratito, ¿no? Mientras que hacen la solicitud y explican cuál es el motivo por el que están recurriendo al ILEF, bueno, se queda que se les va a pasar un terapeuta y demás, y al ratito o a la semana ya no contestan y se les busca, ¿no? Entonces estamos pensando, bueno, ¿qué pasó? ¿No? Posiblemente fue ese momento que tuvo esa oportunidad de expresarse, de hablar, de acomodar sus ideas y ahí quedó, ¿no? Y de hecho es por una de las cosas que también te buscamos, ¿no? Porque como instituto creo que nos servirá trabajar en esto de la sesión única. Y bueno,
Yes, Gabby, that's not unusual. The data in the US and Canada, and I've even looked at the data in Mexico, verify for us that the
okay.
modal number of sessions is 1, whether you intended it to be 1 or not. So one of the really interesting things that I think about is even if they just came in and had an intake appointment at a leaf, maybe just talking with a mental health worker about the problem in order to do a screening or set up an appointment, that can be very helpful in and of itself. So those are accidental single session therapy. So you folks have been doing
Ok.
that for a long
Oye,
time and just haven't been taking credit for being successful.
oye, Monte, y cuando estuvimos, bueno, cuando hemos estado promocionándote y dándote a conocer, ha habido algunos terapeutas que nos cuestionan un poco, ¿no? Dicen, ¿será que sirve que una sola sesión? Eh, ¿Ayuda? ¿No? ¿Qué les dirías a todas estas personas que de alguna manera no están muy convencidas o sienten que no sirve?
Well, you know, humans are built for rapid change. And instances of people making a change after some relatively brief instance, not just with therapists, but in and outside of the human experience, rapid change is pretty common. I can think of religious conversions. Uh, uh, think of the changes in the priesthood after Juan Diego's visit with La Virgen and how suddenly their worldview changed. The story about Saul on the Damascus Road, who was a persecutor of Jews and had a vision that changed him. Well, those are religious experiences, but there are lots of instances, and you probably all know somebody who has quit an addiction cold turkey, someone who has quit smoking after years of this supposedly in an addiction that couldn't be stopped. People have stopped drinking without further intervention. People have stopped smoking and other bad habits. So those are instances of how humans are naturally are poised to change. There was a psychologist, his last name is Miller, that many people know nowadays from motivational interviewing. But early in his career, he was interested in something he called quantum change, and that is people who had made significant changes in their life after some um, short experience. It could have been a walk, it could have been a walk in the woods. It could have been a casual conversation with a friend, and he published interviews about that phenomenon. So the real question, and there are things like neurological events, like the sudden, like acquired savant skills. There are reports of people who have had a neurological event, like a seizure, and after the seizure was over, they could speak languages that they had never been taught. They could play the piano. They could solve impossible problems. We're wired, I think, neurologically for rapid change. So the real question, Gabriella, for people that are asking about that is why would therapy be the one place in human life where change has to be slow and take a lot of visits? Why is therapy the place where we need a lot of visits? So we don't claim that everybody changes fast, but we've stopped pretending that nobody can change really, really fast.
Ujú. Monte, y
So,
bueno, a partir, ujú,
yeah,
perdón,
so let me just
continúa.
say then that what the definition, our definition of single session therapy, it's in that book behind me, Terapia de una sola sesión. The 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 definition of single session therapy that I use and many of us use is that the therapist approaches every session as if it might be the last session that you could have with a client. So we don't think about it as being the first session. We think about it being the last one. It's not the only one, you'll hear me say that maybe later tonight, but certainly in February. We never say this is the only time we can meet. But what we do say is we're going to meet today and we're going to work really hard to see what we can accomplish today. So that's a little hint about what the single session mindset is. And remember, I said that being able to think differently allows us to be able to think that we can accomplish a lot more in one session than we might have thought before.
Okay. Gracias,
Monte, y ibas mencionando algunos ejemplos, ¿no? De lugares, contextos, situaciones, de cambios, ¿no? De cambios que se fueron dando y que se dan de una manera más rápida que los procesos largos, ¿no? Aplicándolo a la terapia, al mundo terapéutico o a los contextos terapéuticos también, ¿para quiénes y en qué contexto aplica la terapia de sesión única?
That's a really good question, Devi. Thank you. So, single session therapy it's really for anyone who wants help now, not after an intake interview, not after a lot of paperwork, not after a screening appointment, but it's for people that want some help now. And what we know is that people are most ready for change. They're most poised for change in their life at the moment that they decide to talk to a therapist. So the more time we put between when they want to get help and when we actually offer it, the motivation actually goes down. So that's some reason. So remember, I said a lot of people don't come back because they got helped. A lot of people don't come back because they didn't get helped. So they came to some clinic and they went through an interview process with an intake worker and were told, okay, you can see a therapist in 2 weeks or we'll put you on a waiting list. They don't come back because they came to get some help and they didn't get it. And you didn't provide help. Why would I go back? So there's really two good reasons why people don't come back after one visit. One is they got the help they wanted, and one is that they didn't get the help they wanted. So number one, single session therapy is for somebody that's ready to change because they come in and ask for change today. Now, it's not for everybody. It's not helpful for everybody all the time. It's most helpful for people who have specific goals that they can articulate to the therapist. And these can be people in transition. In family therapy, that's when we see most of the problems in family is during transition times. Those are excellent opportunities for single session therapy. Sometimes parents might just need a quick consult on something that's going on with their kids. They don't need months and weeks of family therapy. They need a consult about how to be helpful to their child now. Sometimes professionals that are having a workplace problem can benefit from a single session. I do a lot of work in university counseling centers, and that's the perfect place for single session therapy because students have busy lives just like their parents do. They don't have time to spend a week talk 1 hour a week talking to a therapist. They've got homework to do. They've got football practice, just like adults. Adults are not interested in reserving an hour a week to talk to a therapist about a problem. They have the problem now and want the help now. Couples, couples are excellent opportunities for single session therapy. So in my experience, I am very hesitant to make a decision about whether I can be helpful to someone based on some history or diagnosis that they have. I want to be able to sit down, let's have a chat, and let's see if I can be helpful with you today. Um, Now, I will say that single session therapy is not ideal when someone isn't able to participate collaboratively. If they have severe cognitive impairment, if they're in an acute psychotic state, or in situations where their safety is unstable. But even then, in those cases, single session therapy can still function as maybe a triage or a grounding or something that can stabilize them
Ujú,
while they get help
ujú,
somewhere else.
ujú. Sí,
So the
de
short
hecho acá en el
answer,
chat,
Divi, is there aren't any group of people or circumstances or problems that I would eliminate off the bat because in my work in my clinic we don't have much advance notice about the people that we see. We may get an intake form and the client is sitting in the waiting room and we go in and see them. We don't know much about them. And I find that
ujú,
really helpful because sometimes I think knowing too much about people ahead of time limits how creative we can be in helping them.
ujú.
Was
De
that
hecho,
helpful to you or did I?
solamente quería mencionar que justo en el chat mencionaban que en contextos humanitarios eh, es muy útil, no sé qué nos
Yes,
podrías
there have
comentar al
been
respecto.
at
Ajá.
least three papers written on the use of single session therapy in humanitarian crises. And in the book that Arnie and I published, the other one that's behind me there, it says Una Hora. There's a couple of chapters in there about the application of single session therapy after a hurricane and earthquakes. Um, my colleagues, one in Mexico City, Jason Platt, and his uh, colleague John Miller have written about the use of single session therapy in Cambodia with victims of acid attacks, acid burn attacks. So, and I happen to know that during the most recent terrible earthquake in Mexico City, many of my colleagues trained in single session therapy were doing single session therapy on street corners because there wasn't people needed help. They needed help now, and screening and setting up appointments wasn't a good idea for them. In So yes,
Ujú,
I think that's an excellent example. I could probably, I won't, I'll just give you the brief version. One of my former students from a class I taught at Ibero a number of years ago went to work for an organization in Mexico that's like Doctors Without Borders, but it's not Doctors Without Borders. And what she did was she trained women in the remote mountains of Chiapas to be mental health workers in their communities. And she used single session therapy ideas to help them become mental health workers in that very underserved area of Mexico.
ujú.
Sí
I'm
es.
going to have to stop because I could go on and on about those kinds of examples.
No, y yo estaba también pensando, por ejemplo, en la población migrante, ¿no? Que igualmente puede pasar una vez y estamos por ahí apoyando y las vemos y se siguen, ¿no? Siguen su recorrido, entonces también es muy útil para ellos. Ujú. Y Monte, eh,
Yes, I
también,
agree.
sí, sí, también estaba pensando, ¿no? O sea, al final es como, pues es una técnica, es una forma de trabajar para una población en especial, pero creo que también, ¿no? ¿Cómo ves esta situación, ¿no? Como terapeuta familiar, con toda la experiencia, en algún momento puedes decir, a lo mejor puedo trabajar con esta persona, con esta pareja, con esta familia, otro enfoque, o lo puedo derivar, ¿no? ¿Cuándo, cómo, no? Puedes decir, no, esta persona necesita derivación.
That's a really good question, and let me answer it in a little complicated way. Single session therapy is not a theory of therapy. So it's not a theory of therapy like narrative therapy or structural family therapy or cognitive behavior therapy. It's not a theory of therapy. So for anybody out there that has some doubts about whether they want to learn something about single session therapy, I'm not going to try to change your theoretical orientation. If you're a skilled cognitive behavior therapist, there are ways that you can do single session therapy. If you are a skilled Bowenian family therapist, you don't need to change that. You're a good therapist, and that's the main skill to be a single session therapist. So it's a way of delivering services. It's not a theory of therapy. Now, I make a decision at the end of every session with a client about whether we need to meet again. So I always start a session with, you and I are going to work really hard today to see if we can help you get on the road to solving this problem that you've brought today. And I'll check in with you at the end of the session and see how we did. And if you think you need more, we will make arrangements for that. So I never tell them this is their only opportunity. So sometimes at the end of that session, they might say, well, I think I'd like to come back and have another visit. And I might say, great. When do you think, how would you know when you would need to come back? So I don't just say, let's come back next week, but I talk with them about how they would know that they needed another session. If they said, well, I have a friend who has a therapist and they go see them every week and they get a lot out of that, and I think I'd like to do that. I say, great, and I can probably help you find somebody that would be willing to work with you that way. Why don't we spend the rest of this session working on how you will be able to tell your new therapist how they can be most helpful to you? So we use the single session as a preparation for a referral to another therapist. Sometimes people need things that are beyond the scope of the single session, and we always make referrals in those cases if it's appropriate.
Mm.
Okay.
Monte, precisamente preguntan en el chat y también habíamos pensado como en personas que están viviendo alguna situación de riesgo, por ejemplo, riesgo suicida, acá en el chat mencionan violencia de género. En esas situaciones, ¿cómo se trabaja desde la terapia de sesión única?
Those are excellent candidates for single session therapy because their motivation for change is very high and they are more willing to participate oftentimes in therapy than if you pull out a suicide assessment scale and begin treating them the way you would normally do that. So I would say that people that are at risk for suicide or people who are in dangerous domestic situations, they need help now. They don't need weekly sessions to try to get over it. The suicidal person needs to be at a place when they leave your office that we're not worried that they're going to take their life. And if at the end of a single session with that person, I'm still worried, then we come up with a plan to have them go to a hospital or to have some relative come and take care of them for a day or so. But we try to solve that problem of keeping that person alive in that one session. And the same is true of family violence. Is that helpful to the person that was asking in the chat?
Ujú.
I mean, if a person comes in and says, I'm thinking about killing myself, the
Mm,
last thing you want to do is say, okay, we'll fill out all these
ajá,
forms and we'll put you on a waiting list and you can see a therapist in 2 weeks. That's when single session therapy is most helpful because your training is in helping rapidly identify a problem that can be solved in that one
okay.
session and a workable goal to have by the end of the session so that person is safe. And if they're not safe, there's a plan to keep them safe.
Mm, ya, ok.
Muy bien.
Acá nos dicen que sí respondiste a la pregunta.
Ok, muy bien.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Ok.
I probably said more than I needed to.
Oye, Monte, y bueno, hemos platicado que, bueno, sirve mucho esto de la sesión única para situaciones extraordinarias, eventos, esta situación de eh, crisis ¿no? De alguien que tiene intentos suicidas y demás, ¿no? Como de actuar inmediatamente, rápido y salir adelante, darle herramientas y a lo que sigue. Pero ¿cómo lo podemos utilizar, por ejemplo, en nuestra clínica privada?
That's very good question. Um, so I tell private practice people, see, private practice is what I call a service delivery model. It's a way of thinking about how you give people the service that you have. And I think of single session therapy as a service delivery model. That means that I'm thinking that we're going to do one session at a time. The private practice model is that you have people come every week, almost like a subscription to Netflix. You know, you pay for the therapy every week, whether you need it or not. People come every week. So if you're in private practice, the single session therapy service delivery model isn't a good business model for you. But um, if I would say this to private practice people, if you're burnt out on people not showing for clients or you have a long wait list, single session therapy is the best kept secret in the profession. Because if you're in private practice, well, let me tell you what my colleague Arnie Slive did in Canada years ago when he was he his day job was working in a family therapy center clinic, but he also had a private practice. And what he told me was that he had long term. He saw clients for weeks, weekly, many clients weekly. That was the service delivery model. But he didn't like that as much as single session therapy. And on Friday was the day that he did his insurance billing and wrote his notes and all of the things that those of us that are therapists don't enjoy doing. So what he decided to do was he called people that refer clients to him, like doctors and other therapists and physicians. And he said, listen, on Fridays, I will be available for same day appointments for people that might like to come in to have one consultation, one visit to solve some kind of a problem or to have a chat with a therapist. But I won't be trying to recruit them into weekly therapy. It'll be a one-time consultation. His Fridays became very busy because a lot of people were attracted to this idea that I could go see this therapist one time. I don't have to make a commitment. So there's a couple ways private practitioners can use this idea of having special hours during the week where they did single session therapy and they offered it to people that are curious. Maybe they're not really sure they want therapy. Maybe if I could have a trial, like Netflix gives you a 2 week trial. So if you like it, you subscribe. If you don't subscribe. So that's one way private practitioners can begin to think about adding single session therapy into their service And sometimes clients like it so much that they sign up for weekly therapy after all. So it's a way of using time that you ordinarily would be doing really boring things in your life, or and you're doing these consultations for one at a time. So that's one way you can do that. So clients love it. It can fill gaps in your schedule. It fits a natural demand pattern. It immediately differentiates your practice from every other therapist who still treats therapy like it was a gym membership, where you just sign up and you go.
Ok, muchas gracias, Ivy.
Eh, Van presentándose algunas preguntas en el chat, vamos a tratar de irlas incorporando, pero al final
Okay.
también es importante mencionar que
All
vamos a
right.
ir como dando espacio para todas ellas, ¿no? Una de las que van surgiendo, Monte, por ejemplo, y que va en línea también con lo que hemos platicado, es cuánto dura una sesión de terapia de sesión única, por
That's a
ejemplo.
good question. I have done 15-minute single sessions. I have done hour sections. I've done 90-minute sessions. In the clinic where I've spent most of my career working, we have a 1 hour, we have a 50-minute session. And we work on an hourly basis. So we'll do the whole session. Client comes in, gets seen, and they're gone in 50 minutes. And then we have 10 minutes to get ready for the next client and so forth. Now, when I began doing work in Mexico, some of my colleagues there that are doing single session therapy, I won't name names, but you all know these people. They said, well, we need 90 minutes for single sessions here in Mexico. In fact, most of our sessions are 90 minutes here, not an hour like in the US. And I said, why? And they said, well, because we're Mexicans. It takes us longer to tell stories. We use more words. And I said, great, that makes perfect sense to me. But I've also done a 15-minute session in Mexico as well. So what I think is that you fit the time available in the setting where you are. So if you're in a setting where 90 minutes makes sense, then use 90 minutes. If you only have 15 minutes, if you're on the street corner in the middle of Condesa after an earthquake, you might only have a 15-minute time to work with somebody. So some people say, well, if it's single session, do you just do 12 sessions all at once in 12 hours? No, you can do it in an hour or so. I see a question about it, or is the book for sale digitally? I think that the Terapia de una sola sesión is available from Amazon, and I think there's a Kindle version. No. Well, I don't know. Both of those books that are behind me, that are on the right side of the bookshelf there, are available from Amazon, and they may be available in Kindle versions. Um, I know there are electronic versions at Routledge for the English versions.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Anna says that there's a Kindle version in the chat.
Sí.
So what are some of the other
Monte, y
questions
en
that are in the chat we should get?
sí, hay algunas
Uh,
preguntas, por ejemplo, en torno a la diferencia en intervención en crisis o primeros auxilios psicológicos y la terapia de sesión única.
I don't know that there's a big difference. I think single session, I mean, there are protocols for first aid and crisis intervention that might look different than a single session, but they both serve the same need. So, in a sense, if the definition of single session therapy is that the therapist treats every session as if it were going to be the last, I think crisis intervention does that. I think many of the first aid, mental health first aids treat this as if this would be the only session we have.
Sí, 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 sí. Ujú. Y, por ejemplo, ¿qué le dirías a las personas que dudan un poco de la sesión única?
Boy, I'd say that doubt and curiosity are the perfect starting points to being a single session therapy. Single session therapy, as I said, isn't asking you to abandon anything that you already know. It's inviting you to add a tool that actually matches how clients use therapy. Clients make a decision from week to week about whether you were helpful. And sometimes, if you were really helpful, they don't need to come back. And sometimes, if you're not helpful, they won't come back. So, if you do everything you can do to be helpful in every session, even if you see people every week, by the way, even if you see people every week, I think beginning to think about what can we do today to make this session so important that your life is changed in a little way, even a little bit by the end of this session. That's how we're applying single session therapy to every visit that we have. So most people only come once or twice. We already know that. So doing single session therapy simply meets people where they already are. And if you're curious, it means that you've noticed something. If you're here tonight, you have some curiosity. You've probably noticed that clients frequently make changes quicker than our old models would have predicted. So if you're doubtful, that's good. That means you'll approach single session therapy thoughtfully and ethically. The beauty of single session therapy is that you can try it without reorganizing your whole practice. You don't have to buy a new therapy. You don't have to throw away all of those thousands of dollars you've spent learning how to be a family therapist in one place to do single session therapy. You don't have to reorganize your practice. Just offer a few single session slots in your client and let the results persuade you. Most clinicians discover that single session therapy doesn't replace their work, it revitalizes it. So that's for the doubters.
Ok. Oye, bueno, ¿y qué les dirías a todos los que, o qué nos dirías más bien a todos los que estamos aquí, ¿no? Sobre el seminario que vas a dar el 6 y 7 de febrero? ¿Qué esperan?
Boy, I hope everybody here is there. And if they didn't get all of their questions answered tonight, we hadn't planned to answer all of those questions tonight. We had an hour, but we need more for that. So what you'll find in February is 2 days that are designed to help you change the way you think about therapy. It won't be more theories piled on other theories, but very practical, evidence-based skills that you can use on Monday morning after the workshop. Things that you can walk away with and do in your practice uh, the next week. We'll show you how to create moments in a conversation or create momentum in a conversation. How to adapt single session therapy to different populations and different settings. How to manage risk in an ethical and safe way in single session therapy. How to integrate a referral practice, making referrals. How to Some more examples about how to include single session therapy into your private practice, or if you're in a clinic, into a public community mental health clinic. So you'll also, one of the nice things about the February conference is it'll be in person. So you'll be able to meet a community of clinicians who are curious and collaborative and committed as you are to helping clients efficiently and respectfully. So, if you're someone looking for training that's hands-on, energizing, and grounded in real world practice, Mexico City in February is the place to be.
Okay. Muchas gracias, mi querido Monte. Y bueno, antes de empezar con algunas preguntas que todavía no se han contestado, hay un anuncio, ¿no? Donde todos los interesados en entrar en febrero, inscribirse al seminario, entiendo por ahí que hay un 18% de descuento, ¿no? Ahí en el chat está la información, hay una liga y de todas maneras mañana se les va a mandar por ahí otra información. Pues bien, no sé, Sara, si nos ayudas con las preguntas. Sí, es presencial y online, por ahí vi. Van a ser las dos combinadas.
Hola, pues creo que ya se han leído en el transcurso, ¿sabes? Si alguien quiere comentar, abrir su micrófono, adelante, tenemos un ratito más.
Sí, por aquí había una que escribieron, mientras que se animan a abrir los micrófonos, hay una que colocaron, colocó Diana Abigail Martínez Aguirre ya hace un tiempo, y ella menciona que tuvo un entrenamiento de terapia de sesión única cuando estudió la maestría en terapia familiar en la UNAM, FES Zaragoza, con el doctor Pedro Vargas. Trabaja en...
Good for her. And I know Pedro well.
Sí, trabaja en la Clínica de Salud Mental, bueno, en la Facultad de Medicina, y menciona que la mayoría de terapeutas son cognitivos conductuales, excepto ella, ¿no? Presentó este modelo de la terapia de sesión única, pero se encontró con frustración, bueno, tuvo un poco de frustración porque no saben cómo implementarlo. Eh, y también como que sienten que el perfil de los estudiantes de
Yes.
medicina no se ajusta a este modelo. Entonces, bueno, ella dice necesita como alguna sugerencia para poder adaptar este modelo a la clínica, que si tienes alguna idea.
Is she working with medical students as clients?
Sí.
Oh,
Bueno, de hecho, si estás acá, Diana,
medical people do one at a time work all of the time. I don't understand how the resistance was from the students.
Hi, I would like to say something, but um, my English is I'm a little bit out of practice.
Are you hearing some more explanation?
Okay, yes, the clients are med students, but the therapist, they believe that this kind of population, the profile of a med student is different, and they don't know what is
Okay.
the main problem.
Perhaps one idea would be to ask the people that run the clinic how many people come to the clinic one time and don't come back for a second or a third visit, because that tells you that students, the medical students, aren't interested in coming for long-term therapy. So it could be that the therapists at that clinic are convinced that medical students need long-term therapy, but the students may not believe that.
I agree.
So I would start with data.
Sure, yes, that was a question.
And what you might do, and Dr. Vargas could probably help you because he would be more familiar with that situation than I am. But you could offer it as an experiment that maybe one therapist that might be interested in doing this might try it out just to see how it would work with a few students.
Oh, sure. Thank you in advance.
Don't try to change too much all at once.
I know. Thank you in advance, and see you in February.
That's kind of the single session way, is paso a paso, one small step at a time.
Okay, thank you.
Monte, también preguntan acerca de si la terapia de sesión única tiene una estructura específica.
Eso
Yes.
veremos, ¿eh?
And so when I teach single session therapy, I provide a structure for that. But many of my colleagues have different structures than mine. So what I try to do is teach a way of thinking about managing your time and accomplishing something in 1 hour. And then I invite you to think about how you could make the way you work fit within that kind of a structure, and you can invent your own structure.
Ujú. Ok.
So I
También,
mentioned Michael Hoyt. Michael Hoyt has the structure for single session therapy. My colleague Wendy Dryden, who's a cognitive behavior single session therapist, he has a structure. So everybody that does therapy has a structure. And so if you come in February, we can talk about how you can modify your structure to fit into a single session service delivery model.
¿es adecuada para terapia
I
online,
see
es
a
decir, por
question.
videollamada?
Yeah, we did single session therapy during the pandemic online. And and so many places around the world have adopted that. I know a lot of people that I've trained in have online therapy in their private practices, and they incorporate some single session therapy. There is a colleague of mine in Amsterdam who has a business that is all online single session therapy. She works with human resource departments for big corporations in Holland. And so the employees can make use of online single session therapy. So, yes, you can do this online.
Mm. Y aquí tenemos una mano levantada de Anel. Si quieres, puedes abrir tu micrófono.
Hola, buenas noches. Soy Anel Gallardo. Tengo dos dudas particulares. Mi formación es psicoanalítica y me gustaría saber si este
Oh,
modelo
good.
se adecua a todos los modelos terapéuticos, por un lado, y por el otro lado, yo ya trabajé en el sistema público, no me gustó, y ahora estoy en la consulta privada. Me gustaría saber un costo aproximado en el cual se da este tipo de sesiones.
Whatever you charge in your private practice is what you should charge for single session therapy.
No entendí la pregunta.
Anel,
Sí,
Anel, the very first single session therapist was Sigmund Freud.
ajá, sí, sí.
So if you come in February, you probably already know about this, but the case of Katrina, the innkeeper's daughter that Freud went on a walk in the mountains with while he was on vacation, was a
Ujú.
single session. There was another case of Freud, the story about he and the Austrian composer Gustav Mahler, who was having marital problems, and he and Freud took a 5 hour walk around Leiden in the Netherlands, and Freud wrote about that. But it was a single session. It lasted 5 hours. I don't know what Freud charged for it. But I feel safe in assuming that many of those cases that were single sessions that Freud talked about, he used psychoanalytic methods. So I think there's room for that in your practice if you'd
Ok.
like to pursue that.
Bien, muchísimas gracias, un placer.
Thank you.
¿Alguna otra pregunta por ahí?
Sí, aquí hay una. El seminario consiste en adquirir herramientas, recursos, destrezas para hacer una intervención en 1 hora.
In February.
Sí, sí.
Well, yes, there'll be some of the theory, some of the research that supports this, because we all want to do things that have some research basis. So I want to be sure we have some understanding of that. I'll introduce you to some of the ways that you need to begin that are helpful in changing the way you think about problems and their solutions. And then we'll actually show you an example of single session therapy, and we'll talk about some of the interventions that were used to make that session successful.
Okay. Gloria.
Hola, buenas noches. Yo soy estudiante de la carrera de psicología, todavía no soy egresada y me gustaría saber, nosotros como estudiantes, digamos que tenemos algunas microintervenciones, pero no como tal, pues damos una sesión de terapia. Entonces, ¿cómo nos podría ayudar esta terapia de sesión única para poder brindarles a los pacientes una mejor perspectiva del problema que nos comunican?
Boy, I wish I could get single session therapy in the school curriculums. And that's a whole conversation that we don't have time to get into. But yes, I think if you're a student, this is the perfect time to begin to learn about single session therapy. Some of your professors will think you're crazy. Um, I know that UNAM out where Dr. Vargas does some single session therapy training in their graduate program. And I know the UNAM campus in Mexico City, where Nora Renteria does some single session therapy training. It's not as common in schools as it should be. Maybe you can encourage your professor to come to the workshop in February.
Gracias.
By the way, the person at the medical school, maybe you might promote, maybe ILEF could give that student counseling center a discount to their providers if they came to the workshop in February. A group discount.
Claro que sí. Sí, 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 hay descuento para grupos, por cierto. Sí. Voy a retomar otra
Okay, there
pregunta
you
de acá
go.
del... Ajá.
I'm raising my hand. Yeah.
Lola.
Yo, nada más para comentar la observación que hicieron ahorita, nos pueden contactar directamente para las instituciones que quieran algún tipo de organización en línea, que tengan un grupo que vayan a recibir la atención, que quieran verlo, para poder organizar algún intercambio institucional con algún descuento importante, ¿no? Ahorita de entrada, las personas que están aquí, estamos colocando una liga que si se registran tendrán el 18% de descuento. Es un muy buen descuento, se los recomiendo por las próximas 72 horas, de aquí a las 2 de la tarde del viernes, con el código que les vamos a mandar después de que se registre, podrán tener ese descuento. ¿Ok? Pues,
Sí, y también, Lola, aprovechando esta aclaración que haces, han preguntado también si el seminario es presencial y en línea, y sí. Es presencial, Ciudad de México, y en línea también está la posibilidad de la conexión.
Tenemos un cupo limitado presencial, por lo que recomendamos que las personas que tengan interés ya se registren y especifiquen que quieren presencial y pues aparten su lugar lo antes posible. En línea, pues también se va a transmitir y la misma información. Probablemente alguna sesión privada que comparta el maestro Bobel, puede que eso no se publique en línea, pero básicamente el 95% del seminario estará en línea. Y ahí sí tenemos, vale mucho
And there'll be simultaneous translation.
También, sí.
esta maravillosa interpretación simultánea que estamos llevando ahorita, la van a tener en el seminario. Preguntaron si se va a dar un diploma y un reconocimiento. Por supuesto que sí, no es un valor académico, pero sí es la constancia de haber asistido al seminario con su diploma o sea, qué padre, de veras, qué bueno que están todos aquí, qué bueno.
También están
Yo,
preguntando, Lola, si se va a poder ver esta grabación. Y sí, ¿no? Nuestro YouTube.
Se está transmitiendo ahorita en Instagram, en YouTube, por un lado, y se va a subir mañana a Facebook y a nuestra maravillosa página de YouTube. Tenemos ahí, suscríbanse porque siempre tenemos videos súper interesantes ahí. Entonces, sí lo van a poder ver mañana mismo en YouTube, que es la mejor transmisión,
ok,
etcétera.
ok, ok.
And will it
Hay
have
algunas preguntas.
Spanish subtitles? I guess YouTube
No
will do
lo
that
creo que para
automatically.
mañana, pero sale la voz de la traducción. Lo checamos.
Okay.
Ok,
Okay. Thank you.
bueno. Hay algunas preguntas que aún continúan en el chat y otras manos que estaban levantadas. Entonces, acá hay una que
Yeah,
está también hace
these are not
ratito.
shy people.
No. Voy a retomar una del chat y luego le damos la palabra a Estela. En el chat mencionan, ¿en qué es diferente al coaching? He aprendido en coaching algunas similitudes que menciona Monte. ¿Qué nos podrías compartir?
You know, that's a really interesting question. And one of the things that I've become aware of in the last few years is that there are there are people in the field of sports psychology that work with coaches, athletes, and they've become interested in single session therapy. And so there are a lot of applications um, where and you're probably not referring to sports coaching, you're referring to a different kind of coaching. But I think there's a
Mm,
lot of similarities between sports, athletic coaching, um, life coaching, and that sort of thing. But it depends on how you're approaching that session. So if you're a life coach, but the way that you organize and deliver your services is that people come over and over again to you in a planned program, they buy a certain number of sessions. That's not a single session delivery model. So if you treat every coaching session as if this is going to be the last opportunity that you can be coaching that person, that kind of fits the definition.
Okay. Estela tiene
ok.
levantada la mano. No sé si quiera hablar o
Sí,
hacer
hola, buenas noches. No sé si me
Oh,
escuchan.
hi, Estela.
¿Qué tal? Sí, yo tenía una pregunta. Perdón.
Okay.
Yo tenía una pregunta sobre qué, 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 qué ocurre si en la terapia de sesión única nos encontramos con un paciente con déficit, es decir, que pueda tener una depresión profunda, que tenga un perfil narcisista, que tenga como un perfil de un paciente paranoico o esquizofrénico. ¿Qué hacemos en esa terapia de sesión única? ¿Cómo la preservamos? Entendiendo que, como tú dices, es aprovechar al máximo el tiempo porque es la única sesión y probablemente la última. Pero si nos encontramos con estos casos clínicos,
That that's a common question, and let me ask you a question as a response. Let's pick one of those to start with. So which one of those diagnoses would you like to talk about first?
Por ejemplo, un paciente con rasgos esquizofrénicos.
Okay. So think back to the last time that you were working with a schizophrenic. What was it that they wanted changed in their life?
Ah, bueno, no quería sentirse como se sentía, en donde no tenía claro los momentos en que tenía delirios, los momentos en que se transformaba en otro ser.
Okay. And so I would ask him then, if you had some clarity, what would be some real small sign to you that you are achieving a little bit more clarity in your life? So see, I would not focus on the diagnosis or the symptoms. I would focus on what that client wanted changed in their life. And I think that if we can help that person make a little change in a small area of their life, then that will get things moving to change other little things in their life. I think about it. In presentations sometimes I have a picture of a man walking up a hill with a big bag of rocks on his back. And that's your schizophrenic. He's walking through life with this big bag of rocks on his back, and some of them are the voices that he hears, or the other ways that his life is troubled. And so I would say to you, if you could take one little rock out of that person's pack, out of their sack, they would be carrying a lighter load and they'd have more energy to do other things. And so you're just proceeding with getting one rock at a time out of that bag. So you don't cure schizophrenics, but what you do is you work with the problems in living that schizophrenics have so that they're better able to deal with the things that they can't change in their life.
Mm.
So remember when I said that the thing that stuck with me since my days as a trainee with the Galveston Family Institute was if we change the way we think about the problems people have, it changes the opportunities that we see that we could have.
Ok, vamos a
I
ir
don't
con
know if
las
that was a
dos
helpful answer.
Sí, muchísimas gracias. Gracias porque me has dado otro enfoque.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very different. But let me
Vamos
ask you this.
a
Um, how, just think back to the last time that you had a session with a client. At the end of that session, the client said to you, "You have been so helpful to me. We have figured out what I need to do. I know exactly what I want to do with my life. Thank you so much. If I ever need any help again, I'll come back and see you." Now, I'm sure you've had at least one or two or three or four of those kinds of
Me
experiences.
pasó hoy día.
What? It happened today. Great. Now, being a single session
Sí,
therapist means you
coincidentemente.
have more of those happen because you're looking for every session to end exactly that way. So you start feeling better about your work because you're not thinking, well, we didn't do much today, but we always can pick this up where we're left off next week. No. The client then leaves with nothing changed, and they think, well, maybe next week I'll get some help. But if you're helping them every week so that you get more of these people that are talking about how energized they feel, you start feeling better about your own work.
Bien.
De acuerdo, muchas gracias.
You're welcome.
Tenemos una mano más levantada y creo que hasta ahí terminamos. Viviana Porras,
Oh, okay.
Hola, buenas noches.
Viviana.
buenas noches.
De hecho, yo soy la coordinadora académica de Gloria. Coordina la carrera de psicología acá en Irapuato en el instituto. Me gustaría, y bueno, y me da mucho gusto verte por acá, Gloria, y ver que sí ha sido de interés. Estamos justamente dirigiendo la carrera como con un enfoque sistémico y está por abrirse la maestría de terapia, de psicoterapia, también con este enfoque. Entonces, bueno, yo ya estoy anotadísima para febrero, sin duda. Y quisiera saber, aprovechando los comentarios
Great.
de Gloria, si consideras que es importante que, por ejemplo, estas técnicas se les enseñen en nivel licenciatura o en maestría.
When they first start college, I, 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 I think if we can begin to help students in psychology begin to think that not everybody needs long-term therapy to get help, that there are other options. I think that's a good starting point. And realistically, I think if you can provide some training, that is some coursework, and even some supervised training in their graduate programs, uh, before they have a master's degree or a doctoral degree, I think that would be ideal. I think postgraduate training is wonderful. I think it's great, but I'd like to see people getting into being brief therapists much earlier in their career so they don't waste so much of their time learning stuff that won't be as helpful as learning how to help clients in one session. And people that want to make a lot of money doing therapy in private practice, there's still room for you. We're not trying to take your business away. There will always be people, no matter how good we get at doing single session therapy in Mexico City, we'll never take care of the need for people that want private practice psychotherapy. That business will never go away.
Sí, y sobre todo también cuando trabajamos en instituciones, ¿no? Por ejemplo, aquí en México, en el Seguro Social, en el ISSSTE, donde se atienden a los consultantes al mes o a los 2 meses o los citan a los 3 meses, entonces no se puede hacer o sea, es un trabajo totalmente diferente el que se tiene que hacer, ¿no? Este, pues muy bien. Muchas gracias, mi querido Monte. Te esperamos con todas las ganas y todo el gusto del universo en febrero para que estés con nosotros ya de manera presencial y pues no nos platiques más profundo de esta forma de trabajo de sesión única, ¿no? Y bueno, aprenderemos un poquito más, ¿no? Y lo tendremos también para nuestra formación, para el apoyo, para la comunidad, en fin, creo que va a ser muy importante.
Thank
Hay
you. I'm glad
bastante,
you all came, and I look forward to meeting you all personally in DF in February.
Así es. Y sobre todo entiendo que ya, como decías, está por aquí Nora y va a haber algunos otros invitados mexicanos que trabajan ya
Yeah.
sesión única y nos van a platicar sobre lo que se está haciendo en México, ¿no? Y bueno, los interesados ya saben que hay en 3 días un descuento, ¿no? Si quieren aprovecharlo, pues adelante. Bueno.
That's right. Yeah, we'll have Nora, we'll have Sylvia London and Yeka Rodriguez, and we'll have Marina Gonzalez and Saul Cruz and Jason Platt, I hope, will be there. I may be
Esperemos que sí, no
forgetting
falta que nos
somebody.
terminen de confirmar.
I'll mag him.
Claro. Todos.
I think Saul has joined us tonight. He told me he was going to be here, and so I know that he's planning on
Sí,
being
Saúl,
there in
sí.
February as
Yes,
well.
I'm here.
Sí. El que no ha contestado es Jason.
Oh, good.
Ok.
Yo
Okay,
para
I will.
cerrar,
I will have a talk with him.
Ok.
mm, para cerrar solamente mencionaría que hay diferentes preguntas, comentarios en el chat que no los alcanzamos a trabajar el día de hoy, pero que creo que también serían insumo interesante para el seminario de febrero. Por lo que les invitamos a que se inscriban, a preguntar por los descuentos. Y bueno, en particular les agradecemos a todas, todos por este tiempo que hemos estado aquí en conversación con Monte. Monte, te agradecemos muchísimo el espacio que nos has brindado
Thank
para
you.
poderte conocer un poco más. Y
Bueno,
And
bueno,
I'm
si es
putting
todo
my
por el momento.
email in the chat. If people want to email me questions, I'll be happy to get them to them. Let's see. Aquí está.
Gracias por eso, Monte.
So yes, thank all of you for coming. Hey, there's Saul. Hola, Saul.
Hi, Monte. Hola a
You
todos.
didn't
Buenas
have to
noches.
put a tie on.
Sí. Así es. Entonces, pues nos vemos pronto, ¿oh? Y un abrazote para todos, ¿oh? Saludos.
Bueno,
And thank you to people from all over the world that were here. Thank you for coming.
sí,
Gracias a ti, ¿no?
muchas gracias.
Gracias a todos igualmente.
Nos vemos en febrero.
Vale, bye. ¡Tarán! Listo. Ahí vamos.
Preguntas que están en el chat quedan registradas, ¿verdad? Como parte de la reunión, ¿cierto?
No lo sé. O a lo mejor hay que tomarles una foto antes de cerrar. Si hay descuentos para estudiantes, Viviana, sí, si se hace un grupo grande, daremos muchos descuentos. Ok, del Instituto de Irapuato, te va a llegar un correo y creo que ya por ahí salió, ¿no?
No, Gaby, aquí estoy.
Ay, aquí estás. Sí, digo, igual por el correo que te llegue, menciona, ¿no? Que eres la coordinadora. Si se hace un grupo importante, te podemos dar un gran descuento para los estudiantes.